What would it take for the deadliest pilot in history to question everything he knew about aerial combat? Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron, 80 confirmed kills by October 1917, the most feared ace in the sky, a man who had mastered every aspect of aerial warfare. On October 14, 1917, he encountered something that violated every principle of flight, every law of physics, every understanding of combat he possessed. He fired 200 rounds at it from less than 100 meters. Every bullet passed through the target without impact. The object did not evade, did not maneuver, simply departed vertically at a speed that exceeded any aircraft in service by a factor of 10. Tonight, I'm going to show you what the greatest ace of the Great War tried to destroy and couldn't, what 6 elite German pilots witnessed and were silenced for seeing, and what happened to every single witness within 18 months. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the official histories don't mention October 14th, 1917, and why the archives remain sealed 107 years later.
Cambrai, 1917, the largest tank offensive in history. October 14, 1917, Cambrai sector, northern France. The Battle of Cambrai was 7 weeks away. British forces were preparing the largest tank offensive in history. 476 tanks would assault German lines on November 20th. It would be the first mass use of armored vehicles in warfare. The British were assembling this force in complete secrecy. German high command knew something was coming. They didn't know where. They didn't know when. They didn't know what. Intelligence was fragmentary. Reconnaissance was constant. Both sides flew multiple sorties daily, photographing trenches, counting artillery, mapping positions, searching for any indication of the coming storm. Jagdstaffel 11, commanded by Rittmeister Manfred von Richthofen, was stationed at Markebeke Airfield in Belgium. Their sector covered the Cambrai region. Their mission? Intercept British reconnaissance aircraft, protect German observation planes, maintain air superiority over a front that was about to explode. Von Richthofen, age 25, from Breslau, Silesia, 80 confirmed victories by October 1917, the highest-scoring ace in any air force. Pour le Mérite recipient, Germany's highest military honor, a tactician who had written the manual on aerial combat, a pilot who knew every aircraft type, every tactic, every maneuver employed by friend or enemy. He had seen everything the war could produce in the skies, or so he believed. At 15:15 hours on October 14th, von Richthofen led a patrol of 5 aircraft into the sector. His flight included some of Germany's best pilots. Lieutenant Kurt Wolff, 33 victories, known for precision flying and accurate gunnery. Lieutenant Werner Voss, 48 victories, recently awarded the Pour le Mérite just 3 weeks earlier. Lieutenant Karl Emil Schaefer, 30 victories, expert in high-altitude interception. Vitzfeldwebel Sebastian Festner, 12 victories, the most junior pilot but with 18 months of combat experience. Lieutenant Hans Adam, 14 victories, specialist in observation aircraft escort. Experienced combat pilots, every one. Men who had survived when thousands had died. Men who had seen everything aerial warfare could produce. Dogfights, observation balloons shot down in flames, zeppelins burning, experimental aircraft, every innovation and every horror. But what they were about to encounter had nothing to do with reconnaissance or combat as they understood it. The object that should not exist. At approximately 15:37 hours, flying at 4,200 meters altitude, von Richthofen observed what he initially believed to be a British reconnaissance aircraft. Standard protocol: identify, close, engage if hostile. But as he focused on the object, he noticed something wrong. It was stationary, completely motionless in the sky, hovering at approximately 4,800 meters altitude, 600 meters above his position. No aircraft in 1917 machine could hover. The technology did not exist. Helicopters were theoretical concepts, not operational machines. Airships and observation balloons could remain stationary, but they were tethered or moved with the wind. This object was hovering against a 15 km/h wind. Manfred von Richthofen, the most experienced combat pilot in the German Air Service, knew this was impossible. He signaled his flight to maintain formation and began climbing toward the object. As he closed to within 300 meters, the object's characteristics became undeniable. It was not an aircraft. It was not an observation balloon. It was not anything in his experience or training. According to von Richthofen's report, filed at 1920 hours that same day to Jagdstaffel 11 headquarters, the object was cylindrical in form, approximately 15 meters in length, based on comparison to known aircraft dimensions, 4 meters in diameter, the width of a typical fuselage, but the length of 3 fighters placed end to end, metallic surface, silver gray in color, highly reflective in the afternoon sun, almost mirror-like in its polish, no visible wings, control surfaces, propeller or engine nacelles, no rudder, no elevator, no ailerons, none of the control mechanisms required for flight, completely smooth exterior with no markings, no national insignia, no identifying features of any kind, no rivets, no panel lines, no seams, as if the entire object had been formed from a single piece of metal. It hung motionless in the sky at 4,800 meters altitude. The Fokker DR-3 triplane von Richthofen was flying had a service ceiling of approximately 6,100 meters, but reaching that altitude required maximum engine output, full throttle, and significant time to climb gradually. This object was hovering effortlessly at 4,800 meters with no visible means of propulsion. Von Richthofen circled the object, examining it from multiple angles. It remained absolutely motionless. He approached to within 150 meters, expecting some reaction. None came. The object simply hung in space, silent, motionless, as if suspended by invisible wires from the sky itself. Von Richthofen made a decision that would change everything. He would attack. 200 rounds through a solid target. He maneuvered into attack position behind and below the object. Standard tactics for engaging enemy aircraft. Approach from the blind spot close to effective range, fire a controlled burst, observe results. At 15:41 hours, from a distance of approximately 80 meters, he opened fire. The Fokker DR-1 was equipped with twin synchronized Spandau machine guns, firing 7.92mm rounds through the propeller arc. Each gun rate of fire approximately 500 rounds per minute. Von Richthofen fired a sustained burst lasting approximately 12 seconds. 200 rounds, minimum, probably more. At 80 meters range, every tracer round was clearly visible, every fifth round burning bright orange against the afternoon sky. He could see exactly where his bullets were going. Every round struck the object. Every round passed through without impact. No ricochets, no sparks, no metal fragments, no visible damage of any kind. The bullets simply transited the object as if it were not there, as if he were firing at empty air. He could see the tracers entering one side of the metallic cylinder and exiting the other side, their trajectory unchanged. Von Richthofen ceased fire, climbed 200 meters to gain altitude, repositioned for another attack angle, opened fire again from the starboard side. Same result, bullets passing through a solid metallic surface without any effect whatsoever. He tried a third attack from directly below, firing upward at the object's underside. Same result, tracers entering, tracers exiting. No impact, no damage, no reaction. The object did not maneuver to avoid his attack.
attacks, did not return fire, did not attempt evasion of any kind. It simply remained motionless while 200 rounds transited its position, violating every law of physics von Richthofen understood. A solid metal object that bullets passed through. Impossible. Yet he had just witnessed it. His entire flight had just witnessed it. And then the object demonstrated that bullets passing through solid metal was not the most impossible thing it could do. Subscribe if you want to understand how a solid metal object can be transparent to bullets, because what happens next reveals capabilities that still have no explanation in 2025.
The departure that defied physics. At 15:43 hours, 2 minutes after von Richthofen's last attack run, the object moved. According to the report filed by Lieutenant Kurt Wolf, who was flying 400 meters behind von Richthofen and witnessed the entire engagement from a different vantage point, the object accelerated vertically, not gradually, not with the slow climb an aircraft would make gaining altitude, instantaneously, 0 to full velocity in less than 1 second. Wolf, a pilot with over 18 months of combat experience, had seen every type of aircraft perform every type of maneuver. He had never seen instantaneous acceleration. Aircraft required time to build speed. Engines required time to reach maximum power. Propellers required time to generate thrust. This object went from stationary to maximum velocity with no transition, no acceleration curve, as if it simply switched from one state to another. Wolf estimated its vertical climb rate at 300 meters per second based on observed altitude gain over time. To put that in perspective, the fastest aircraft in service in October 1917 was the SPAD S-13. Maximum level flight speed, approximately 60 meters per second, 222 kilometers per hour. This object was traveling 5 times that speed in a vertical climb, but even that comparison fails to capture the impossibility. No aircraft could climb vertically. Aircraft climbed at an angle, trading forward speed for altitude gain. Vertical flight requires thrust greater than the aircraft's weight, something only rocket engines could achieve. And rocket engines did not exist in operational aircraft in 1917. This object climbed straight up, perpendicular to the ground, at 300 meters per second. Lieutenant Karl Emil Schaefer, flying at 4,600 meters, attempted to follow. He pushed his Fokker DR-1 to maximum climb rate, approximately 5 meters per second, one of the better climb rates of any fighter in service. He maintained visual contact for approximately 8 seconds. In that time, the object climbed from 4,800 meters to over 7,000 meters altitude. Schaefer's aircraft, straining at maximum power, had gained perhaps 40 meters. The object was climbing 50 times faster than the best fighter aircraft Germany possessed. At 7,200 meters altitude, Schaefer lost visual contact. The object had climbed beyond the visible range of observers at lower altitude. It simply disappeared into the upper atmosphere at a speed no aircraft could match, using a propulsion system that left no exhaust, no smoke, no sound, no evidence of its operation. Von Richthofen's flight regrouped at 4,000 meters. 6 pilots, 6 pairs of eyes, 6 independent observations of the same impossible event. They had just witnessed technology that exceeded anything in human capability by orders of magnitude. But they were not the only witnesses, and that's when the real problems began.
12 different sources, one impossible object. Von Richthofen's flight returned to Markabeek Airfield at 16:15 hours. All 6 pilots immediately filed incident reports through their commanding officer, standard protocol for encountering unknown aircraft or unusual phenomena. Von Richthofen's report was the most detailed, 13 pages, handwritten, describing the object's appearance, behavior, his attempts to engage it, and his technical assessment. He included specific observations, the object's complete silence,
its lack of visible propulsion, its apparent solidity despite bullets passing through, its impossible acceleration and vertical flight capability. The report concluded with a statement that would later be weaponized against him. The object observed does not correspond to any known aircraft type of any nation currently engaged in hostilities. Its performance characteristics exceed all established parameters of aeronautical engineering. No rational explanation based on current technology can account for the observed phenomena. A factual assessment from Germany's most experienced combat pilot. But the pilots were not the only witnesses. Ground observers at 3 different German artillery positions reported an unidentified aerial object at approximately 1540 hours on October 14. Hauptmann Friedrich Müller, commanding the 234th Artillery Regiment observation post near Fontaine Notre Dame, filed a report describing a cylindrical metallic object at high altitude, approximately 5,000 meters, remaining stationary for several minutes before departing vertically at extraordinary velocity. His report noted machine gun fire from German aircraft attempting to engage the object, confirming von Richthofen's account from a ground perspective. Lieutenant Ernst Bauer, artillery observer with the 107th Field Artillery Regiment, positioned 6 kilometers east of Müller's location, documented the same sighting independently. His observations included the object's vertical departure at what he described as velocity inconsistent with any known aircraft, appearing to accelerate instantaneously to maximum speed. 2 ground observers separated by 6 kilometers reporting identical observations without communication between them. Independent confirmation. Even British forces observed the incident. According to Royal Flying Corps sortie logs obtained after the war and archived at the National Archives in Kew, 12 RFC aircraft were operating in the Cambrai sector on October 14th between 1500 and 1600 hours. 3 separate British crews reported observing German fighters engaging an unknown object at high altitude. Captain James Hartley, RFC, flying a Bristol F-2 fighter on photographic reconnaissance mission over German positions, noted in his post-flight report, observed multiple Fokker triplanes, identified by distinctive 3-wing configuration, attacking unidentified craft at approximately 16,000 feet. Craft appeared stationary despite wind conditions, then departed vertically at extraordinary speed, unable to identify as Allied or enemy aircraft. Recommend intelligence investigation. His observer, Lieutenant Thomas Whitmore, sketched the object in his mission log. That sketch was confiscated when the log was archived in 1919. It has never been released to researchers. It remains classified. 2 more RFC crews filed similar reports. Lieutenant Jeffrey Morrison and Lieutenant Charles Blackwood, both flying observation missions in the sector, both reporting the same object, the same behavior, the impossible departure. By 900 hours on October 14th, reports from 6 German pilots, 3 German ground observers, and at least 5 British air crews were circulating through various headquarters on both sides of the lines. 12 independent sources, all describing the same object, all documenting the same impossible capabilities, all providing corroborating details that could not have been coordinated between them. The response from German High Command was immediate and absolute. Within hours, the machinery of suppression was in full operation, and it would not stop until every witness was silenced. Subscribe if these multiple independent confirmations are convincing you this was real, because the suppression that follows proves someone in high command knew exactly what had been observed and could not allow it to become public knowledge.
The machinery of suppression. At 21:15 hours on October 14th, 9 hours after the sighting, intelligence officers from Luftstreitkräfte headquarters arrived at Markebeck Airfield. Hauptmann Walter Aschoff, chief of air intelligence for the 4th Army Sector, personally led the team. He brought with him 4 intelligence officers and 2 military policemen. Their mission was clear: contain the incident. The 6 pilots were summoned individually to the airfield commander's office. Each pilot was questioned separately to prevent coordination of testimony. The interrogations lasted 4 hours, from
21:30 hours until past 00 hours the following morning, each pilot was required to provide technical details: altitude, airspeed, distance to object, duration of observation, weather conditions, armament expended. Each pilot was asked to reconcile their observations with known aircraft types. Could it have been a British experimental aircraft, a captured German prototype, an observation balloon, an atmospheric phenomenon? They could not reconcile their observations with any conventional explanation because what they had observed was not conventional. At 01:27 hours on October 15th, all written reports were confiscated by order of Hauptmann Oschoff. Von Richthofen's 13-page technical analysis was seized from his personal files in his quarters. Wolf's report, including precise timing and altitude calculations, was removed from the squadron records. All 6 reports, all supporting documentation, all flight logs for October 14th were placed in a sealed folder marked Geheim, secret. The pilots were then issued a direct order from Luftstreitkräfte High Command: absolute silence regarding the October 14th incident. No discussion with fellow pilots, no mention in personal correspondence, no reference in any form under any circumstances. The order cited operational security and prevention of enemy intelligence advantage, a standard justification for classification, but the real reason was simpler and more fundamental. No one in German High Command could explain what had been observed. Technology that exceeded human capability by orders of magnitude, an object that violated the laws of physics as understood in 1917, bullets passing through solid metal, instantaneous acceleration, vertical flight at 300 meters per second, silent propulsion with no visible exhaust. These observations could not be explained, could not be rationalized, could not be made to fit within the framework of acceptable reality, and unexplained phenomena create problems. Problems with morale when soldiers realize their commanders cannot explain what they've witnessed. Problems with credibility when official denials contradict eyewitness testimony from reliable sources. Problems with maintaining the illusion of control when events occur that are beyond anyone's ability to control or understand. Better to classify, suppress, and eliminate the testimony entirely. The process of elimination would begin within days. And what happened to those witnesses over the next 18 months would prove that the suppression was not just bureaucratic procedure, it was systematic elimination.
The pattern of death begins. Lieutenant Werner Voss, 48 victories, one of Germany's most skilled and decorated fighter pilots. He had witnessed the entire encounter from 300 meters behind von Richthofen's position. His report, filed at 18:45 hours on October 14th, described in technical detail how the bullets visibly passed through the object. He documented the instantaneous vertical acceleration using calculations based on observed altitude gain. He noted the complete absence of exhaust, propeller wash, engine sound, or any indication of conventional propulsion. His observations were precise, professional, unassailable. On September 23, 1917, 3 weeks before the Cambrai sighting, Lieutenant Werner Voss had been awarded the Pour le Mérite, Germany's highest military decoration for valor. At age 20, he was one of the youngest recipients in the war, a national hero, featured in newspapers, celebrated in propaganda. On October 22, 1917, 8 days after the Cambrai incident, he wrote to his father in Kleefeld. The letter, discovered in family archives in 1973 and subsequently donated to the Bundesarchiv in Koblenz, contains a passage that was never meant for public eyes. I have witnessed something in recent days that challenges all understanding of aerial combat and the nature of flight itself. I am forbidden to speak of it to anyone, even to you, Father. But I must tell you this: I saw the impossible made real. If something should happen to me in the coming days or weeks, know that I saw something our commanders cannot explain and will not acknowledge. The truth is being buried. I fear the consequences of having witnessed it. On
September 23, 1917, 10 days after writing that letter, Lieutenant Werner Voss was killed in combat. The official account, documented in Luftstreitkräfte records and repeated in every history of the air war, states he was shot down during a dogfight with British SE-5A fighters over Frazenburg, Belgium. 7 British aircraft from No. 56 Squadron, RFC, engaged his lone Fokker DR-1 triplane at approximately 1800 hours. He fought for 10 minutes against overwhelming odds, demonstrating extraordinary skill before being hit and killed. His aircraft crashed near Plum Farm, Frazenburg, a heroic last stand against superior numbers. The British pilots who shot him down, including Captain James McCudden, a future Victoria Cross recipient, expressed profound respect for Voss's skill and courage.
That is the official story, repeated in every account of the air war. But the medical examination tells a different story. The examination of Voss's body, conducted by British medical officers Captain Henry Morrison, RAMC, and filed with the War Graves Commission under reference WG 1917-09-23 Voss, noted injuries inconsistent with the official account, specifically a single bullet wound to the head, entry point at the base of the skull just below the occipital bone, exit wound through the center of the forehead, trajectory indicating the shot came from behind and slightly below at close range, within 10 meters based on powder residue patterns. This trajectory is inconsistent with fire from an SE-5A engaging from standard deflection angles during aerial combat. SE-5A fighters attacked from above and behind or from the side, firing at the target's fuselage and wings. A shot entering the base of the skull from behind and below suggests the shooter was positioned directly behind the victim at the same altitude or slightly lower. In aerial combat, this position is nearly impossible to achieve and maintain while firing accurately. The trajectory is, however, consistent with execution-style shooting. Victim facing forward, shooter directly behind at point-blank range. The medical report was classified upon filing and sealed. It remains restricted at the National Archives in Kew under Section 3(4) of the Public Records Act, documents whose release would be contrary to the public interest. No investigation into the discrepancy between the official account and the medical evidence was ever conducted. The file remains sealed until 2067, 150 years after Voss's death. Why does a medical report from 1917 require classification until 2067? What public interest is served by hiding the truth about a man dead for over a century? Voss was the first. He would not be the last. The pattern was only beginning.
5 more deaths, 0 investigations. Lieutenant Kurt Wolff, 33 victories, the pilot who had flown directly behind von Richthofen during the engagement and witnessed the bullets passing through the object. His report, filed October 14th, included precise timing of the encounter, exact altitude readings taken from his aircraft's instruments, detailed technical description of the object's vertical departure. He had over 18 months of combat experience, was known throughout Yasta 11 for meticulous attention to detail and accurate observation. He had never filed an inaccurate combat report. On May 11, 1918, 7 months after the Cambrai incident, Wolff wrote to his younger sister Margarita in Stuttgart. The letter, archived at the Militärhistorisches Museum der Bundeswehr in Dresden, contains this passage: "There are certain things I have witnessed during this war that I cannot speak of, even to you. I have been warned that discussing these matters would have consequences. I fear not the enemy I can see in combat, but the silence that has been imposed upon those of us who have seen things our commanders refuse to acknowledge. If anything happens to me, know that I tried to tell the truth and was silenced for it." On September 15, 1918, 4 months after writing that letter, Lieutenant Kurt Wolff was killed near Bois de Marais, northern France. Official cause of death: shot down during combat with French SPAD-13 fighters. His aircraft, a Fokker D-7, was observed going down in flames by German ground forces. His body was recovered 3 days later, September 18. According to the recovery report filed by the 245th Infantry Regiment, the body was badly burned, making identification difficult. Identification was confirmed through personal effects: his pilot's badge, his Pour le Mérite decoration, and identity papers that somehow survived the fire. The aircraft wreckage, examined by German technical intelligence officers, showed damage consistent with ground impact and subsequent fire, but the wreckage also showed bullet holes in the cockpit area, specifically in the pilot's seat and the rear fuselage directly behind the pilot's position. The bullet holes showed a downward trajectory, as if fired from above and behind the aircraft. French intelligence logs for September 15, 1918, obtained after the war and archived at the Service Historique de la Défense in Vincennes, show no SPAD squadrons operating in the Bois de Marouet sector on that date. German loss reports list combat with enemy aircraft as the cause of Wolf's death. No explanation for the absence of enemy aircraft in the area at the time of the crash. No investigation into the contradiction. Coincidences.
Lieutenant Karl Emil Schaefer, 30 victories, the pilot who had climbed to 5,400 meters attempting to track the object as it departed, and who had calculated its rate of climb at over 300 meters per second. His mathematical analysis, included in his October 14th report, was undeniable. No aircraft in existence could climb at 300 meters per second. The fastest rate of climb for any fighter in service was approximately 6 meters per second. The object was climbing 50 times faster. On December 3, 1918, 3 weeks after the armistice ended the war, Schaefer was traveling by train from Cologne to Berlin to visit his family for the first time since 1916. The war was over. He had survived. He was going home. At approximately 14:30 hours, somewhere between Hanover and Braunschweig, he fell from the moving train. He died instantly upon impact with the railway embankment. The official investigation, conducted by the Prussian Railway Police and filed December 4th, concluded accidental death. The finding noted passenger appeared to lean out of window for fresh air and lost balance due to train movement. No witnesses to the fall were interviewed in the official investigation, but fellow passengers interviewed decades later by researchers reported that Schaefer had been seated in a private compartment. The compartment door was found locked from the outside when railway staff discovered his body was missing. The window through which he allegedly fell measured 40 centimeters wide by 50 centimeters high. Karl Emil Schaefer was 178 centimeters tall and weighed approximately 75 kilograms. The physical dimensions make accidental fall through that window virtually impossible. The investigation file was closed within 48 hours of the incident. No further inquiry was authorized despite the physical impossibilities. Wiestfeld-Webel Sebastian Festner, 12 victories, the most junior pilot in the flight, but experienced enough to recognize the impossible when he witnessed it. His report, filed October 14th, emphasized the object's complete lack of sound. He had positioned himself approximately 200 meters from the object during von Richthofen's attack runs. At that range, any aircraft with an engine, rotary, inline, or radio would be clearly audible above the sound of wind and his own engine. He heard nothing from the object, just the sound of von Richthofen's twin Spandau machine guns and the sound of his own Oberursel rotary engine. The object was completely silent. On March 12, 1918, 5 months after the sighting, Festner was admitted to Reserve Lazarette II, a military hospital in Cologne. Official diagnosis recorded in his medical file: severe combat fatigue, acute anxiety disorder, trauma-induced stress syndrome.
The medical records, archived at the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv in Freiburg, contain this notation from the examining psychiatrist, Dr. Wilhelm Hoffmann. Patient exhibits entirely rational behavior in all respects, except persistent claims regarding impossible aerial
aerial phenomena observed during combat operations. Patient insists he witnessed a metallic flying object that defied known principles of aeronautics. Patient becomes agitated when told such observations are impossible. Recommend isolation from other patients to prevent spread of delusional ideation. Festner was interviewed multiple times by military psychiatrists over the following weeks. They deemed his testimony regarding the October 14th incident to be delusional manifestations of prolonged combat stress, despite his otherwise entirely normal behavior and rational thinking. He was prescribed rest, isolation from other patients, and sedative medications. On April 7, 1918, less than 1 month after admission, Sebastian Festner died in the hospital. Official cause of death recorded in the hospital register: complications from Spanish influenza. The hospital records note he had been placed in complete isolation in a private room 3 weeks prior to his death on March 18th. He received no visitors during that isolation period, not even medical staff except for twice-daily medication delivery. His body was cremated within 24 hours of death, before his family in Hamburg could be notified or could arrange to claim the body. The justification? Infection control protocols for influenza cases. The hospital's influenza ward records for March and April 1918 list 47 patients admitted with confirmed influenza diagnoses. Sebastian Festner, isolated in a private room and receiving minimal contact, was the only one who died. The other 46 patients recovered and were discharged. Lieutenant Hans Adam, 14 victories, the last surviving pilot from von Richthofen's October 14th flight. He survived the war when so many did not. He returned to civilian life in Munich. He became a commercial pilot in the 1920s, flying mail routes and passenger service. He never spoke publicly about the Cambrai incident, adhering to the silence order even after the war ended and the Luftstreitkräfte ceased to exist. In 1932, 14 years after the armistice, he was contacted by a journalist named Heinrich Vogel. Vogel worked for the Berliner Tageblatt, one of Germany's most respected newspapers. Vogel had spent months researching unexplained aerial phenomena during the Great War. He had discovered references to the October 14, 1917 incident in archived Luftstreitkräfte communications that had been declassified in 1930. The references were fragmentary: a mention of unidentified aircraft over Cambrai, a notation about reports from Josta 11 requiring special classification, but enough to indicate something significant had occurred. Vogel tracked down Hans Adam through veteran registries and requested an interview. Adam, after 14 years of silence, agreed to meet and discuss what he had witnessed. The interview was scheduled for August 16, 1932, at Adam's apartment in Munich. On August 15, 1932, 1 day before the scheduled interview, Hans Adam was found dead in his apartment. Official cause of death: suicide by gunshot, a single bullet to the right temple. The weapon, a Luger P08 pistol, was found in his right hand. The Munich police investigation concludes suicide. Case closed within 24 hours. But Hans Adam was left-handed. This fact, documented in his military service records and confirmed by family members and colleagues, appears nowhere in the police report. A left-handed man shooting himself in the right temple with his right hand is physically awkward and extremely unlikely. No investigation into this anomaly was conducted. The journalist, Heinrich Vogel, continued his investigation despite Adam's death. He had already compiled significant research on the Cambrai incident and planned to publish his findings. On September 8, 1932, 3 weeks after Adam's death, Vogel was struck by a vehicle while crossing Friedrichstrasse in Berlin. The vehicle, described by witnesses as a dark sedan with no visible license plates, struck him at high speed and did not stop. Vogel was taken to Charité Hospital with severe internal injuries and multiple fractures. He died 2 days later, September 10th, without regaining consciousness. The driver was never identified, despite an intensive police investigation. The vehicle was never located. Vogel's research notes and files on the Cambrai Cambrai incident, disappeared from his office at the Berliner Tageblatt. His editor reported the files had been there on September 7th, the day before the accident. On September 9th, while Vogel was dying in hospital, the files were gone. No one at the newspaper could explain their disappearance. The files have never been recovered. No copies are known to exist. A summary statement from the investigative journalist, Heinrich Vogel, sets the stage. 6 pilots witnessed the impossible. 6 pilots filed reports. Within 18 months, 5 were dead. The 6th died 6 months after the sighting, and anyone who tried to investigate their deaths met the same fate.
The death of the Red Baron. Manfred von Richthofen himself, the most famous pilot of the war, was killed 6 months after the Cambrai incident. April 21st, 1918, near Vaux-sur-Somme, France. Shot down during combat over the Somme Valley. Official British account, Australian machine gunners firing anti-aircraft positions from the ground struck his aircraft. Alternative account, claimed by the Royal Air Force, Canadian pilot Captain Roy Brown shot him down during aerial combat. The two accounts contradict each other. Both cannot be true, yet both are presented as official explanations in different documents. The forensic evidence supports neither conclusion definitively. The autopsy, conducted by British medical officers on April 22, 1918, documented a single bullet wound. Entry point, right side of the chest, between the ribs, traveling upward and forward. Exit point, left side of the chest, near the collarbone. The trajectory, analyzed by multiple experts over the subsequent decades, is inconsistent with ground fire from Australian positions. Ground fire would enter from below at a steep upward angle. This wound shows a shallow angle, almost horizontal, slightly upward. The trajectory is also problematic for the aerial combat explanation. Captain Roy Brown, flying a Sopwith Camel, claimed to have fired on von Richthofen from behind and above. Fire from that position should produce a downward trajectory. The actual wound shows an upward trajectory. Some ballistics experts who have analyzed the evidence argue the trajectory is consistent with fire from ahead and below, as if the shooter was positioned in front of von Richthofen's aircraft at a lower altitude. This position matches neither the Australian ground gunners nor Captain Brown's aerial attack. A third possibility, never officially investigated. Von Richthofen was shot by someone in a position that does not match any of the claimed shooters. The investigation was perfunctory, lasting less than 48 hours. The body was examined, the wound was documented, a conclusion was reached, the case was closed. Manfred von Richthofen, the most valuable propaganda asset in the German military, a pilot whose death would normally trigger extensive investigation, was buried with full military honors by the British within 2 days. Unusual treatment for an enemy combatant, especially one of such significance, unless there were reasons to ensure the matter was closed quickly, quietly, and respectfully, without prolonged investigation or controversy. The October 14, 1917 incident was never mentioned in any official history of Jagdstaffel 11. Von Richthofen's autobiography, Der rote Kampfflieger, The Red Fighter Pilot, published posthumously in 1917, contains no reference to the Cambrai sighting. The Luftstreitkräfte operational summaries for October 1917, archived at the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv in Freiburg, show a gap in entries for October 14. The pages for that date exist in the bound volume. The entries do not. The pages are blank except for the date header. Someone removed the operational summary for October 14, 1917 from the official records. The incident Manfred von Richthofen considered significant enough to file a 13-page report about does not appear in the official history of his squadron. 6 pilots, all dead. The greatest ace in history, killed in circumstances that don't match the official explanations, and the archives remain sealed. The pattern is undeniable. 6 elite pilots observed an object that violated known physics on October 14, 1917. They filed detailed reports through official military channels. Within 18 months, all 6 were dead under circumstances that defy rational probability. Werner Voss. Medical evidence suggests
Execution, not combat death. Kurt Wolff, killed when no enemy aircraft were in the area. Karl Emil Schaefer fell through a window too small for his body. Sebastian Festner, only influenza patient to die in a ward of 47. Hans Adam, left-handed man shot in right temple with right hand. Manfred von Richthofen, bullet trajectory inconsistent with claimed shooters. The statistical probability of 6 pilots from a single flight dying within 18 months under suspicious circumstances has been calculated by multiple researchers. The most conservative estimate, approximately 1 in 840,000. These were not men in the same unit suffering collective casualties in a single battle. These were individuals scattered across different assignments, different locations, even different countries after the war. Yet they were dying at a rate that defies probability. Their testimony was classified, suppressed, erased from official records, and the suppression continues today, 107 years later. The original reports filed by von Richthofen and his pilots are held at the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv in Freiburg, Germany. Classification level, der Schlusssache, classified material. Access, restricted to authorized researchers with specific security clearance and demonstrated need to know. Multiple historians have requested access under Germany's Freedom of Information laws. Every request has been denied. The stated reason, release of the requested material would be contrary to the public interest and could compromise national security relationships with allied governments. No further explanation is provided. The public interest argument is never elaborated upon. The national security justification is never detailed. How could documents about events from October 1917, over a century ago, still threaten national security in 2025? What relationship with allied governments would be compromised by releasing technical reports about an aerial observation? What are they still protecting? Files that have been partially released are heavily redacted. In 2004, German authorities released a small portion of Luftstreitkräfte intelligence summaries from October 1917 under the 75-year declassification rule. The release included 247 pages of documents. Of these, 89 pages were so heavily redacted they contained fewer than 20 legible words per page. The sections corresponding to dates from October 12th through October 16th, 1917 were removed entirely from the release. The notation exempted under Section 3, National Security, and Section 5, International Relations. The specific dates surrounding the Cambrai incident remain classified, while documents from weeks before and weeks after were released. Someone made a deliberate decision to keep October 14th classified. British archives show the same pattern. Royal Flying Corps records at the National Archives in Kew include sortie logs, combat reports, and intelligence summaries for October 1917. The files for October 14th are present in the catalog. Researchers can see they exist. Access is denied under Section 3(4) of the Public Records Act. Documents whose release would be contrary to the public interest. Why does a routine air combat report from 1917 require 150-year classification? What possible public interest is served by hiding the truth about events from over a century ago? The suppression that began in 1917 continues today. The witnesses are dead. The reports are sealed, but the date is approaching.
Subscribe if this 107-year pattern of suppression convinces you they're hiding something real, because every week I analyze the historical incidents and modern cover-ups that prove this phenomenon has been observed, documented, and systematically erased for over a century.